It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. And even if this week looks a little funky on the astrology side in the outer world, this week I'm going to help you understand how to use this energy to propel forward. It is possible, my friends. We've got a great episode. We're talking about the eclipse, the lunar eclipse that happens to be the full moon. I'm going to explain a little bit about eclipses and what they mean in the outer world versus what they mean in your interior world. And the two are separate. And I'm going to bang that home. I'm talking with Eli Gomez about how to use your voice using astrology. He is a up-and-coming astrologer who really serves his college community, but I don't care if you're older, you could benefit from hanging out with Eli. Eli is a little ray of sunshine. So we'll be listening to Eli. Of course, we'll do patron shout outs, and I'll also be talking about how we can use astrology in everyday life for everything. I've got a bone to pick with some people, and I'm feeling a little spicy. So grab your tea, grab your coffee, grab your matcha, grab your iced coffee, grab your whatever, your favorite bevy. And whether we're taking the kids to school or we're taking a walk or we're going to work, which we will find perfect parking, hang out with me for a while because it's an interesting week. And of course, we'll go over the headlines. But remember, that's what we're going to see in the news. It doesn't mean good things can't happen for you. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to maintain our consciousness even in the midst of turmoil, this week on the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. Man, it's really easy to go down some deep, dark rabbit holes when it comes to looking at the outer world stuff, when we look at all the craziness that's happening out in the world. And I released the 2025 year ahead to patrons $5 and up. And that's yours to stream however long you're a patron. Okay. And it's disconcerting. And I have to remind you, I actually changed nothing in November when I gave the follow-up on those slides. Those slides are the original from June of 2025. And I started writing them in May. And it was a lot to hold on to, because this is a time of massive systemic change. We've been going through massive systemic change for probably 30 years, okay? And actually, it started in the 19th century, but I'm not going to give you a boring history lesson, okay? And it is disconcerting to watch everything we know be turned upside down. Nothing is going to remain constant, my friends, over the next several years. But that doesn't mean it's all going to be bad. I know it looks like it right now. I know we look at the world crumbling around us. The Jenga tower has fallen. But remember, Jenga towers aren't stable to start with. That's the thing you have to remember. And yet each one of us can build our lives. I see clients in my office on Zoom 3 days a week. I've moved it to 3 days a week because I'm producing podcasts, writing a magazine, and we're about to start some more podcasts. I have some exciting news I'm going to share a little later. And they're going to have great times. They're building their lives forward. And so can you. Okay. I know it can be hard when we look at social media and all the people, with their arguments and there's a lot of shenanigans going on. You can still build a good life. And that's some of what I'm going to talk about today when we talk about the eclipses and how to use that energy for you. It's easy for me to go down those deep, dark rabbit holes when I'm doing predictions. And I'm not just a predictive astrologer. I'm actually a progressive evolutionary astrologer. I focus on how to help people grow and evolve in their own this lifetime, not having to wait to reincarnate, but how to grow and expand in this lifetime and live authentically And let me tell you, with Neptune and Aries coming up, authentic vibes are everything. Knowing who you are, knowing what you really want, not living a life described and defined by other people, but understanding at the core of who you are. And we all have social cultural programming we have to unpack to get to that. It's like layers on the lotus as they unfold. It's like a Tootsie Roll pop. How many licks does it take to get to the inside of a Tootsie Pop? 1, 2, 3? No, it takes a few, unless you bite it, right? And we just don't get to bite through life. But there are ways and techniques that we can use to evolve our understanding of self, to help actualize and realize ourselves, even in the midst of chaos. Okay. In fact, there's a lot of opportunity in the midst of chaos. And you have to develop your inner resources. You have to take stock of who you are. None of that imposter syndrome is going to get you through anything. None of it. And especially if you identify as female, especially so right now. I know we've all been trained to lean into, oh, I don't feel good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not smart enough. Other people know more than me. All of that. That's not humility. That's self-sabotage. And it doesn't help us. And this full moon in Virgo, this total eclipse of the moon, is a great time for pruning that out and replacing it with the knowledge of our actual skills and abilities and talents. And don't you dare leave a comment saying you don't have any, because I will delete it. Okay. Pandering is not what I do. I'm not going to be codependent with people. I will argue for your highest potential. Okay. Not unrealistic expectations, not what I think you can do, but what I see in you. And imagine, what kind of world would it be if people actually knew their value, knew their worth? That's the world I want to live in. That's the world I want to be in. I don't want to be in a world where people only lean into the oppressive thoughts that society and culture and family patterns have placed upon them. I want to live with a bunch of brave sons of bitches who are willing to take their lives into their own hands and say, you know what? I'm going to risk failure today. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And that, above all else, my friends, is why I will never say, oh, the timeline's changed if I get a prediction wrong. Because I am 87% accurate. That means there's 13% of the time I am not. There could be a variety of reasons for that. It takes guts to stand up and be in your integrity. And other people will poke and poke and poke and poke and poke and say, you were wrong. But they never have the balls or the uteruses to show up in their own truth, with their own integrity. And that's what I'm daring you to grab hold of this week. I know it's something, but I will argue for your unfoldment, for your highest expression of self in any given moment. And some days it's the day we scream into the void. Some days is all we can do is get up, put our feet on the floor, go brush our teeth, celebrate that. If that's the best you can do today, wahoo! My mom has this rule. She has something to do every day. And if she can do nothing else, she makes her bed. That's how I used to know she wasn't feeling good, because I'd call and I'd say, how are you? And she goes, well, I made my bed today. I'm like, because she's a busy bee. You have to build your inner resources, my friends, to make it through these very interesting times. They are destabilizing because there is new structure that will emerge. And what is that structure going to look like? Well, what are we building? Because it's a collective effort. But we can't work in unity until we authentically know who we are. And we have Neptune in Aries coming along at the end of the month. Neptune is sitting at the 29th degree of Pisces. And so delusions and illusions are up, and a time for disillusionment is up. Divine disillusionment is up. And the full moon in Pisces is going to divinely disillusion us even further. Now, if you've had Pluto already cross your Neptune, you already know what it's like to be divinely disillusioned. And it's a good thing. It's where we see the fairy tales of life aren't true. Do you really need a knight in shining armor to pick you up and rescue you? Do you? Or do you need that princess in the tower to rescue? One of the worst movies I ever saw was the third Shrek movie, because it showed an alternative reality for Fiona, and where she was this kick-ass, badass, revolutionary. And the resolution to the film was her going back to the life where she was underappreciated, taken for granted, and had given her agency over to Shrek. I was pissed off. I was like, that's a stupid message to give kids. Why can't you be all that you can be? Why cannot you build upon your skill sets, your natural abilities? We're always seeking something that's really, really hard to make it valuable. When, in fact, what we can do is do the stuff that comes naturally and with ease and have that be valuable. Everybody complains about capitalism, and yet you fall into that trap every single day by devaluing your natural skills, talents, and abilities, and by refusing to even acknowledge that you have them. No, you're not in trouble with me. I know I can sound stern. It is time, my friends. It is time for us to stand up in all of our glory and release the chains of oppression that have been going on for not 100 years or 200 years or 300 years, not even the advent of colonialism as we have seen it over the last 500 years. It goes back to the Bronze Age. Check out Gerda Lerner. It's Women's History Month. Gerda Lerner was the founder of the field of women's history because it didn't exist before the 1970s. The Creation of the Patriarchy is a fabulous book. It was published in 1986, and I found it in my high school library, and it changed my worldview. In it, she didn't have a lot of answers, but she did offer a lot of questions and was asking young women who were coming up into the sciences to please study these things in the future. And funny enough, the more that have, the more we have found out that all those warriors, they weren't all men. And it wasn't just Vikings. That made sense to me. I know what I've done to protect my children. And I'm not a very big person. I'm pretty little. I'm tall for my family, but I'm 5'5". And you'll say, oh, well, that's you, Laurie. I've heard that my whole life. Well, that's you, Laurie. You're special. No, I'm not. I'm human. I am human. You are human. We have these abilities, and everybody has different abilities. I am not good at everything. And I bring people together with me who are good at things I am not. Some of that is physical limitation, my eyesight. So I bring in people who have better vision to catch the things I miss. But I lean into my knowledge and lean into my strengths, and so should you. And contrary to what Mr. Musk has to say about empathy, he is wrong. Empathy is a very, very important aspect of our personalities. but it should not be debilitating. There's a big difference between true empathy and codependence. True empathy does not render us paralyzed. We should not rob people of their experiences by trying to remove their pain. We can support them in their journeys and stand side by side. It isn't cold to look at a situation and understand it is not happening to you, and yet feel sympathy for those going through it and be of service to those going through it. That's a skill. But I'm an empath. Me too. And with Neptune at the 29th degree of Pisces, it's very easy to be energetically overwhelmed right now. Very easy to be energetically overwhelmed. I've been joking that you could wear a hematite suit of armor and good luck. The spigot won't turn off. Not until Neptune enters Aries. And then it's going to feel really weird because that energy is going to shift gears hard. And that happens on March 30th of 2025. It'll be very interesting. And I'll talk about that more as we go along in the month. Because this week, on the 13th/14th, we have the full moon in Virgo, which is a total lunar eclipse, with Mercury stationing retrograde. Lucky us. And I've already been kind of feeling the pre-retrograde with some tech snafus. They've been kind of funny. I'll give you your survival guide. If you want the full one by like Mercury through the houses, then you can check out the Awake Space Astrology magazine in the Patreon. But I want you to understand, it does you no favors to discount your value, to discount your understanding of self, to discount your ambition. Just because some person out in the world says you're not valuable because you're this kind of person doesn't make it true. Since it's Women's History Month, my grandmother, she was a trailblazer and a pioneer when it came to working in the world, in state and county government. And when I was in high school, I was railing against misogyny, and things weren't fair and it wasn't equal. And I had been shut out of a computer science class because the teacher had said I would be a distraction. And I didn't even know what that meant. I'd known those guys since we were like 10 years old. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no clue what it meant as a woman or young lady to be a distraction. I was bucktooth with braces and thick Coke bottles. If you think my glasses are thick today, man, they could not compress lenses back then. They were glass. And they were so heavy, they'd push my nose down and scar my nose. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm one of the guys. What are you talking about? Which honestly, those guys would have thought that too. Well, I found out later they didn't think that, but they were gentlemen. Anyway, I was really angry because I really wanted to learn to code more than I knew how. I knew how to code in BASIC, but I knew I needed to learn more, right? This is like 1983. And my grandma said, Laurie, you don't get equality by asking for it. You get it by taking it. Act equal. Man, those words have rang with me my whole life. And I didn't understand them at 14. I was like, how do I act equal? I don't understand this. I didn't. It took a long time. And those words echo all the time with me. You know, all the time. She was an Aries. She was short. Like her hair made her 5 feet tall because she kept it floofy. But man, you didn't mess with her. She was a powerful lady. We have Venus in Aries retrograde. And I want to talk a little bit more about that on the podcast today, too, because I think a lot of people don't understand that the stuff blowing up right now isn't screwing you over. It's opening pathways. The world is changing. That is a fact. And it is not the first time the world has changed. And in change is opportunity. In crisis is opportunity. We don't help ourselves by creating further obstacles with our mindset. Mindset is so, so important. And I get that some people don't want to see the reality of the world that is. But I can guarantee you, spirituality isn't about deluding yourselves from the actual facts of what's going on in life. Spirituality has nothing to do with kumbaya and living this pious life. You're not supposed to not be in the world. That doesn't make it spiritual. You're not here to be disembodied and not connected. We are all children of Gaia, every single one of us. And what is Gaia? Gaia is Earth. We are children of this planet, and we are here for a purpose. And that purpose isn't necessarily to lead an army or lead a charge or be the liberator or be the great business person or be the great musician or actor or be famous. It can be to have a range of experiences. And it is through our perceptional lens. It is through our perceptual lens that we craft and shape our reality. Switch up your perception and you change your world. I didn't say it would be easy, but with this full moon in Virgo and that eclipse, you have a remarkable opportunity to prune away the thought forms that are habitual, that hold you back, the self-criticism, the worry, the needing to be perfect before you can start anything. Because the people who are successful are always willing to risk failure. Always willing to risk failure. They'll speak up. And they're okay with not knowing the answers. It takes courage to be authentically yourself and not fit into the mold of someone else's designs. It takes courage. And we all have it. Don't let the collective miasma convince you you have none. You do. You're here. You're listening to this. You've aligned into this space. It's what you needed to hear. You have the courage to take one more step, one more breath, and try again. That is all that is asked of us. Railing against the what isness of reality isn't going to change it. Action will. So let's talk about how you can use the energy of the full moon in Virgo that happens to be a lunar eclipse to your advantage. Eclipses can sound really scary, especially when people are equating them from the mundane to the personal. But you see, on the personal level, it's a full moon on steroids. On the mundane level, which is the outer world, it's the bigger happenings, things that have less agency than you do. They can be a little bigger. We will see natural events. In fact, science is proving that all the time, that, they've just recently in the last few years been talking about an occurrence of more seismic activity in coordination with eclipses. Okay. And we have been seeing it's going to be a little more seismic. This week has been pretty active so far, and it's only Monday. Notice these haven't necessarily been where people live. These been in the middle of the ocean or somewhere remote. It's part of how the world works. Seismic activity is disconcerting to us as human beings and can be devastating to human beings, but it is part of how the earth operates. On an individual level, you have agency. So let's understand a few things about eclipses. I wrote about this in the Awake Space Astrology magazine's March issue because we have 2 eclipses this month. We have a total lunar eclipse and we have a partial solar eclipse. Now, the total lunar eclipse is visible in North and South America, across the Atlantic, into Eastern Europe, a little bit of the Levant, and Western Africa. It skips Western Australia. Okay. But the rest of Australia gets to see it, as does parts of East Asia. Okay. So it's going to be very interesting. That's a lot of visibility. Eclipses are only eclipses when they're visible. That's a major rule. So all the people who make a big deal, like if you're in LA, don't worry about that solar eclipse that's coming up at the end of the month because it's not visible where you live. And I will cover that a couple weeks from now. Okay. If it's not visible, it is not an eclipse. Now, the total lunar eclipse is very visible in all of North and South America. Well, not all of South America. It kind of like misses Brazil and a little change above and below. I mean, the totality of it. Anyway, I'll put the map in the Patreon post for this podcast, so which I put out publicly, so you guys can check that out. Visibility matters. The reason why eclipses are considered malefic in traditional astrology is because it usually meant some bad news for leaders, because there might have been big storms coming up, or there might be conflict and wars. Nobody's happy when that happens. It could be economic failings, crop failures, things like that, which usually didn't happen to help an emperor or a king or a general. On an individual level, those of us who do not hold the CEO of a major corporation's rank, for those of us who are not world leaders, as important as we are as individuals, but we don't hold a role that impacts the collective, which is the moon. Okay, the moon represents the people. And so the lunar eclipse is the moon, okay, having a moment with the sun, and it'll turn red. And, so imagine there's no light pollution. You're in a village, there's no electricity, and it's very dark, and you can see the Milky Way, and the moon comes out, and it's blood red. How'd that make you feel when you didn't have a scientific explanation? You don't be like, shit's going down. This is not good. Every single culture in the world says don't go outside to look at an eclipse. It's bad luck. And some of that with a solar eclipse is you'll burn your retinas. So you go blind. That was really bad luck back in the day, because it was very hard to survive. Okay. It's hard enough now. Nobody accommodates for vision. Nobody. If you know, you know. The energy of an eclipse on a personal level, though, can be absolutely empowering if you shift your mindset to it. You got to attune your energy to it. Okay. Now, what do I mean by attune your energy? Well, that means you tune in. Okay. You tune into it. And that means you need to tune up. It's not high vibes only. Okay. I don't roll that way. but you got to tune up. You can't be thinking, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, nobody does what I say, everybody ignores me, I might as well go eat worms, and be able to tune in to the frequency you need to empower yourself. You're not there. Your stream of thought is in the problem thinking, not the solution thinking. Okay? So if you want to tune in, you need to be like, what skills do I have that I don't value enough? What are the things I say? Where am I technically good at something, but say, oh, I'm just good at that. That's, just something I do. Right? Whether it is how you cook meatballs and chicken soup, or how you crochet a blanket, or how you write poetry, or how you do art, or how you do spreadsheets, or how you organize. Oh, well, I'm just good at that. That's nothing. It's just something I do. Ask yourself, where do I do that? Because you can prune that thought process and make note of your skill set. Virgo is the technician. It's about precision. It's skilled labor. Okay. And skilled labor can include being really good with your hands, a plumber, an electrician, being good at handy stuff. I had Kim on the podcast last week, and she learned how to use power tools and was like, wait, why do I think I can't use these? Of course I can. I'm capable. Are you good at learning? Because just because you don't know how to do something doesn't mean you won't forever know how. Being good at learning is a skill. Being good at listening is a skill. Being good at translating meaning is a skill. Writing down your special interests. And instead of letting a diagnosis of any kind define you, and I know a lot of people get unhappy with me when I say this, and I'm okay with that. Because you see, I used to too. I always say there's 5 years of my life I'd really like back, because that's when I was attached to the labels. I identified with my pain story. I identified with, quote unquote, my trauma. I identified with the labels and the diagnoses, and it held me back. It was oppressive. Not identifying with them doesn't make them go away, but it disempowers them a little bit. They're not running the show. Your mind isn't running you. You run it. No matter who you are, because that is how human brains actually function. And so what if you have a busy brain and your mind is always going off at 1,000,000 miles an hour? Not everybody's supposed to think about one thing at a time. Not everybody's supposed to sit still for 8 hours a day. In fact, I will argue that is the most toxic thing in the world. Not everybody is supposed to sit quietly and not question. Not everybody's meant to not fidget. In fact, I think more of us are designed to fidget than not. Right? Most people are fairly kinesthetic. Not everybody, obviously. I urge you to find Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. I urge you, because we're all smart in different ways. It's not just about being good at writing, your verbal skills, speaking, or math. There's so many. Some people are just naturally good at being outdoors. Some people are naturally good at mechanical things. Some people are naturally good at rhythmic movement. Some people are naturally good at catching undercurrents and tones. Some people are incredibly masterful at understanding other people, those interpersonal skills. Some people are really good at understanding themselves. Those are all forms of intelligence. Some people are athletic, and some people are what we would think of traditionally intelligent, book smart. Some people are street smart. Some people have more wisdom. You know, like I look at an astrology chart a lot like you look at a character sheet in D&D. You know, you've got your constitution score, you got your wisdom score, your intelligence score, your charisma score, your strength score, and everybody's going to roll life a little differently. If you're not counting what you're good at, it's going to be problematic if you continue to oppress yourself. And I'm not saying don't take your mental health into account. Absolutely take your mental health into account. But understand it does not identify who you are. It is an aspect of self, but it is not defining of self. It's a big difference. And that way of thinking changes it. There's no shame to our mental health. We all have struggle. Anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD, ADHD. Some of that I don't consider a problem. Some of it, if it gets in the way of living your life, it does. Like it all gets lumped together as disorders. And what makes it disorderly? Is it a disorder because it's disrupting your ability to be a cog in the wheel of a society that thinks we need to be automatons, machines, robots? What if you could live your life fundamentally authentic? It'll feel almost like blasphemy. I know, because I've built mine. It wasn't easy. And I don't think everybody should do what I did. I just couldn't live that way anymore. I couldn't live compromised from all of who I am. And it was a little messy and a little bumpy to get here. That's why I help other people unfold themselves maybe a little more gently. In chaos is opportunity. And those who can hold their consciousness as steady as possible. And it doesn't mean you don't slip. I cry plenty. I look at the state of the world and I go, oh my God. No wonder it was murky. No wonder. How could we conceive of such dastardliness when we know better? And of course, it looks plain as day in retrospect. We can look back and follow the lines and go, oh, there it is. But hindsight is always 20/20. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. Can't live life based on that. All we do is get to walk forward. Even though time is non-linear from a quantum perspective, in a physical perspective, the physical illusion that we live in, it is linear. We are born and we have an expiration date that we don't know. And everything else we do in between is living. And it can be scary when things are falling apart and the things we've relied on, the people we've relied on, the walls we've relied on look like they're going away. But ask yourself, what's opening up for me? I was talking to my daughter, Sarah, who will be doing more podcasts with me. It's just, we're in another shift. And she said, this person said this thing about me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to turn that into real energy that works for me. And I'm like, wow, I love that attitude. Take that shade and turn it around. What you throw at me, I shall transmute. What you throw at me, I shall transmute. What looks like defeat shall be a victory. The thing about Virgo energy, and as we approach this Virgo full moon, this is something I want you to remember. Virgo energy often looks outside of itself because, it's the healer, it's the technician, it's looking at the field of battle and going, who can I save today? Who can't I save? And I got to pick the people I can save because triage is like that. It's not super fun. Okay. You have to step back and be a little bit detached from it all. And you have to look and go, okay. And it doesn't mean Virgos don't have compassion, by the way. Virgos are often some of the most compassionate people I've ever known, but they will let somebody fall on their ass if that's what that person needs to do. They will not rescue them necessarily from the consequences of their actions. And that can be the most compassionate act, because being codependent with people, where you try to take responsibility for their path and their actions, can get you both hurt. Take it from a Libra moon who took a long time to learn these lessons. We cannot take responsibility for other people's pathways. But Virgo does this. They will project onto other people their attention and their energy and forget about themselves. And we all have Virgo in our chart. We all have all 12 signs in our chart. Okay. If you don't believe me, watch my intro to the natal chart video on YouTube. Okay. You can also find it in my Patreon. Okay. It's public. It's free. Just watch that because you'll figure out you have all 12 signs, even if you don't have any placements there. Okay. That energy is in the chart. We all have all 12. So just because you don't like a sign doesn't mean you don't got that energy. And in fact, a lot of what we don't like in others is a projection of what we don't like in ourselves. Ouch. But what I'm going to tell you is this Virgo full moon is going to show us a really big mirror of where we've been putting our energy into other people's hopes, dreams, and aspirations instead of our own. It's going to show us where we need to prune the oppressive thoughts, where we discount our technical abilities and skills. I was talking to my BFF, Kirsten. So Kirsten Soga, the greatest chocolatier in the world. She is amazing. She's also a hell of a damn good life coach, and she helps me out in the mystery school, which has a new name coming up soon. So hold on, guys. There's some cool stuff coming up for that. But she is effectively, I've made her head mistress, basically, because it's a cool title. And she's been on the journey with me for all but 2 years of that process that developed, that helps people actualize and realize and develop their projects and build their lives in meaningful ways. But I was talking to her the other day and she said, oh, I'm going to make this coupon. And I was like, okay, cool. And she goes, you know what? You taught me something really important. And Kirsten's older than me. And we came to technology at different times of life. And way back in the 80s, you could screw up a computer really easy by hitting the wrong button. So all of you people who are like thinking your parents are wussies when it comes to tech, no, they probably formatted their hard drive by accident. You really could screw things up. And trying to convince people who might have lost a job or been threatened with job loss because they formatted a hard drive, it can be traumatic. And so I have worked with her because I was her teacher years ago before we became friends. And I was working with her technology. And I was like, click around. You can't hurt it. Click around. You can't get it wrong. You can always undo something. You're not able to get into the part that you can hurt things with anymore. You're going to be fine. Just click around and learn from experience. You don't have to know it right away. And it might take a second. You just have to be a little patient. And she's been working on her website. And she was like, you taught me that I could just be patient with myself and click around, and I didn't have to know the answer right away, and it was okay. And I was like, damn, I love that I taught you that. That is the grace you need to give yourself on anything. Like if you're like, oh, I'm not good at gardening. Did you kill 10 plants? I've killed a lot more than that in the 30 years I've been gardening. A lot more. And I killed ivy in college. That's a talent. I didn't water it at all. I forgot to water it. So that'll kill a plant. Overwatering will kill a plant. The wrong soil will kill a plant. Plants die. They germinate easy. And it's okay. Just because you weren't born good at it doesn't mean you can't learn the skills. I wasn't born good at astrology. I treated it like a language because it exhibits qualities of language. And I taught myself alongside my teacher. He was there to guide me. And I studied treating it like a language, which means I did reiterative practice, meaning I did it over and over and over and over until I got it. And then experience. This full moon in Virgo is powerful. It is an opportunity to prune oppressive thoughts, because when you project your consciousness onto what the other guy is doing, you're not looking at what you're doing. When you're so busy in other people's business, like they're not meeting their full potential, they're not taking care of themselves, they're not going to therapy, they don't have the right therapy, they are not living up to their potential, they're not advocating for themselves, they don't have the right job, they're not doing their self-care, they're not eating right, they're not blah 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 blah. That's none of your business. Your business is you. It's not our job. It is not our job to foist advice on other people. Unsolicited advice is like one of my biggest pet peeves. If I didn't ask for help, don't jump in. Don't try to rescue me. I like to learn by trial and error. I don't need to get it right the first time. I don't care if I mispronounce a word because I learned it through reading. Somebody corrects me, I'm like, okay, thanks. But go, you said that wrong. So the fuck what? It's learning. We're human beings. We are designed to learn. We are not designed to be perfect. Virtue is one of your greatest shadows, because if you're worried about being seen as virtuous, if you're worried about being seen as above reproach, if you're always afraid of what everybody else is thinking about you and you're busy thinking about what everybody else is doing, it's not actual virtue. Virtue is you're good just to be good. That's it. You don't care who sees it. You don't care who notices. You just do the right thing to do the right thing. I mean, think about those guys who go on the street and give a homeless person, like $10,000 or get them. I think it's great they're helping a person, but did they need to make a video about it and be like, oh, look at me, I'm great? And everybody's like, oh my God, you're so great. That's not virtue. That's performative. Virtue is just fucking doing it. And maybe asking the person, what is it that you need? And listening to them before you say, you need this. Because you're going to have a better chance of them having overall long-term success by actually working with versus doing for. I'm not saying don't help people. I'm just saying build a relationship. Listen to their actual wants and needs and desires, because sometimes if you are over generous or you do for somebody, it can be overwhelming to them. It's a big change, and maybe you have to massage into it, right? You have to warm up into it. The same with ourselves. If you have oppressive thought habits where you don't think you're good enough, you're worried about what other people think, you feel like you have to reach these arbitrarily, high standards of perfection, that you have to be in the right relationship, that somebody's got to be like approving of you, blah, 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 blah. You may not be able to switch to, I love myself, I'm totally all that, I love my skills, I know I'm good at stuff, and have all the confidence in the world. You might want to do some baby steps. The good news is Virgo energy is about process. It is about the step-by-step learning of technique, the step-by-step process of doing something well. It's about precision, and precision has to deal with process. Okay? You can leverage the energy of this full moon, that is also a lunar eclipse, by noticing where your attention is going. And when you're taking it off yourself because it's uncomfortable and it's easier to look outside of you. It's so much easier to look at what everybody else is fucking up instead of you. It's so much easier to point fingers at what other people aren't doing for themselves. You know, do what I say, not as I do, right? And you don't need to treat it like a confessional or a testimony. I see that a lot in spiritual spaces because so many people left the evangelical movement, and they'll come in and they're like, I have to testify. You know, they may not say it that way, but like, I have to say I got too deep into my shadow work and I got lost along the way. Why? As we say in the mystery school, in the ANI process, okay, the ANI process, which helps you align and nurture so you can make an impact. All right. The power is in the noticing. The perfection is in the correction. The power is in the noticing. Oh, crap, I do that. The perfection is in the correction. What do I want to do differently? How can I think differently about myself? If there were no chains on my hands and ankles and I was free to do anything I wanted, if money was no object, what would I actually be doing with my life? Instead of thinking, I'm stuck, I can't go anywhere, I don't have this. Instead of taking inventory of what is fucked up in your life, what if you built a different inventory? What would it like to feel confident inside of myself? What if I have all the skills I need to take the next step? What is my logical next step of action? If I can't do all of what I want to do right now, what is the one thing I can do to move me forward? And that's not bullshit. That's just honestly how actually we become successful. This full moon is hitting my Pluto and my South Node. I'm very fascinated to observe what happens around it. I kind of have a feeling I know what will happen. I have secured a place to rent to build a studio for the Awake Space. And I couldn't talk about it last week because they were having a vote on Monday. And because it's a local business association who's going to rent out the building they have. And it's cute little storefront. And trust me, if you're a patron, you'll get to see all the behind the scenes stuff as we build sets and get ready for Laurie Thinks Out Loud and Miles to Success and Laurie the Story Lady and all the other fun podcasts I want to start. No, I'm not going to stop doing astrology. There's just other stuff I want to do too. And plus we'll be producing, my daughter and I will be producing other people's podcasts as well. So I'm bringing on astrologers to read at the Awake Space at wokeastrology.com. I'm not going to quit reading. It's just I've pared down my schedule so I can do other things that enliven me. Okay. So the cool story, and I'll tell you how I manifested this. So I moved here in July to be with my parents who are elderly. and they don't need a ton of help. They're very, very independent people. But my brother and I were both a little concerned. And I was like, I don't want to just come out for emergencies. And we've done so much healing as a family. Everybody's done their work or is doing their work, right? And I was no contact for almost 20 years. I was a little bit of a hipster before it was popular. Trust me. All of you who hear, but it's your mom, it's your dad, it's your parents, you should honor them. Yeah, I know. It's exhausting. But we've done the work. And if we haven't cleaned it all the way up, it's in process. And it was important to me. I'm a Cancer. So it's a one Shetland pony town. It's not even a one horse town. It's a pretty small town. It's a pretty small place. And there's the coolest storefronts in this Wyoming town. And I would take my hot girl whack and I'd look and I'd be like, one of those would be fun to rent. Because I really can't take us to the next level with the Awake Space sitting with my blurred background. Yeah. I can come out cooler than this. We can go to the next level. And there's so much I want to teach. And I know RuPaul has said it. If you want people to take you seriously, you should probably wear a suit. I got suits. I just don't feel like doing it here. So I'd walk through and I'd walk through town and I'd go, gosh, those are so cool. But the problem with a small town like that, usually to have storefront open is people either give up or they die. And I didn't want anybody to have to give up or die for me to find a building. I just was like, it'd be really nice just to have one open up. And I didn't put much more into it. It was wouldn't that be nice? Now, if you want to manifest stuff, you want to keep it light. You don't want to be like, I want this and this and that. And like, be meticulous in all your details. If you're so controlling of it, you make it harder to come in. I didn't care which building on that street. I just want a building. Can I rent it? I didn't even need the whole thing. I was okay with a little bit. Which actually kind of happened. I got the bulk of it. But anyway, about 3 weeks ago, my parents went to a meeting and found out that it was going for rent and it fit into the budget. And I gave them a call. Like my mom and dad found about it on Friday night and I gave them a call on a Monday. I saw it on the Monday and it's perfect. It's even soundproofed, guys. It has pegboard up on the walls. Like, are you kidding? It's crazy cool. So we'll be able to put in the sets. It even has another separate office space, where I can film other things too. Do my TikToks and do all of that. I know I haven't been on TikTok, but it's honestly been a little crazy because my mom hasn't been feeling well. And then, it's just been kind of one thing after another. And, I didn't have the energy, and I've had my own stuff. In fact, I was pretty sick Friday. I laugh now, but I was not well. And just feeling better tonight, Sunday night. May have answered a question with my mom's health, but by me getting sick. But I find it really funny when I go on to TikTok and people are like, we need you, where are you? And I'm like, has anyone ever said, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? And nobody needs me. You need yourself. But anyway, I think that full moon is going to be when I have the lease and I sign the lease and we get started on the next project. And I let go of the limiting thoughts I've had about growing this. And yes, I have. I know you see me as super competent and super confident, but you have to remember, I'm always thrilled when people listen. I'm like, really? People want to hear what I have to say? That's crazy. I spent a lot of years where nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. One of the most beautiful healing things in this whole process is I didn't expect in this little tiny town for people to be excited about what I do. Because when they asked about my podcast, I was like, well, the subject matter may not land great here. You guys might not be interested in it, and that's okay. I will have others, I'm not here to evangelize my beliefs on anybody. I have a great audience, and I have a wonderful membership support. We are 100% listener supported, and I'm so proud of that. And they were like, no, what is it about? And I said, the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. Like, what? The Awake Space Astrology Podcast. It's almost like, just like trying to slide it in there. And the young lady, Roxana, who is the head of the business association, said, oh my gosh, I do sound bath healing and tarot. And I was like, what? No way. And people are really open to it. And I'm like, no way. That's cool. So super excited to be welcomed, because where I lived for 17 years in Washington, it wasn't very accepted. And I wasn't very accepted. And there were a lot of reasons for that. It was the only place I've ever lived where I wasn't welcomed. I've lived all over the world and people met me with open arms, but that spot was a lot. There was a lot of healing that happened there, and because of the social isolation, you get what you get from me, because what did I have to do? I had time to study. But to have people be excited was pretty cool and very healing. And remember, Virgo is the sign of healing. We can heal wounds with this energy. We can cut out the detritus. We can put a salve on the old scars. We can give ourselves some love. And if you've been attuned to Reiki, give yourself Reiki. Okay. I've been attuned to Reiki since 1999. And the one person we often forget to give to is ourselves. I'm going to end this segment by reading to you the Virgo rising horoscope. I haven't done that in a while. For a while I was reading like the horoscope for the sign. Even though we're in Pisces, I think Virgo risings need to hear this. All right, fine, Pisces, I'll read for you too, because Pisces always feel left out. They're like, why are we always last in the list of signs? I'm like, because it's the alphabet. So this is the Virgo rising horoscope. But I think everybody can resonate to a certain degree with this, because we all have Virgo in our charts. And if you want to blow by blow on what's happening with the full moon through the houses, I'll do that for patrons in the Patreon this week. So the title is Mind Your Beeswax. The subheading is Focus on You. You have an eagle eye, and you can see exactly what people need to be doing to get where they can reach their full potential. You are a master planner, a great talent scout, and an amazing strategist. Yet, there's this little detail you often overlook. You're often so invested in other people's trajectories that you lose yourself to their hopes, dreams, and visions, and you forget about your own. You get a lot out of being a helper, the go-to person, the idea person. And yet, are you where you want to be? If yes, that's great. However, later this year, you'll thank me for this little lecture. It's time you started working towards your own aims. It's time you started to level up. If the past several years hasn't driven home the importance of making sure the brass tacks of agreements are fair to you, that you get your due out of all the effort you put into those nearest and dearest, then I don't know what will. In March, you need to network with the people who are going to support your dreams. It's time to start preparing for something that bears fruit later, and you'll get a taste of it in March. And if you want to know about the full and new moon, that is listed in the horoscopes on the sidebars. And that's in the Awake Space Astrology magazine. All right, Pisces rising. I'm not going to leave you out because it is Pisces season and this full moon is going to be opposite. So, discretion is the better part of valor. Selfing. March finds you in a delightfully creative space. You're able to put yourself out there with your full authority if you let yourself. For years, I've gone on about how you are as much a transmitter as you are a receiver, because it's true. And if you're going to transmit against the flow of the collective, trust me, I do know how hard that is. Because Lord, have mercy. People do not take their energy hygiene seriously, and it can be a lot. However, you can and will make a difference if you do what you do best, and that is be in your own little bubble. Some people say it's Delulu, but it's actually one of your superpowers. If you can hold your focus on yourself and allow yourself to lean into the immense urge to create this month, you'll fare better than if you try to run to everyone else's rescue. You are not a knight in shining armor when you deplete yourself, take on too much, or martyr yourself for other people's benefit. Your desire to rush in to save people who appear to be drowning often leaves your own head underwater too long. Every lifeguard knows you have to think of your own safety first if you're going to help someone else. You can help yourself and maybe one other person this month if you focus on finding your groove. And groove you shall find if you can switch your attention inward. You have an opportunity to glow up if you use your immense power to imagine for your own benefit. It will help others in the end. All right, that's the Virgo Pisces axis, and that's what we're looking at since we have the nodes in Virgo and Pisces, and that's why we're having the eclipses in Virgo and Pisces. I hope you take me at my word on this, guys. You can use this energy to power up. All right, let's do some patron shout outs and then we will listen to a conversation that Eli Gomez and I had about using your voice, using astrology, how to find it, what to do with it. Ooh, I want to thank all of our newest patrons. Without patrons, there is no podcast. Been doing some polls. And people have been wanting to know how to deal with the energy. So that's what we're going to have coming up in patron only podcasts on how to deal with the energy. We've got our newest patrons. I always do shout outs for them. We've got Lydia, Megan, Carrie, Rebecca, Liz, Nikki, Allie, Heather, Charisse, JJ, Astera, Mia, M, Beatrice, Elizabeth, Krista, Mary, Mariah, Anastasia, Kay, Sam, Snarklepagus. I love that. Maggie, Joanna, Nicole, Space Cadet 28, Karen, Owl at the Moon. Oh, I love that name. Ramona, Melissa, Sarah, it was Sarah. TJ, Divine AF, Lori, Jess, Evelyn, Taylor, Jackie, Melissa, Julia, Kelsey, Abigail Drennan, Ayla, Artiana, Smitten Jazz Kitten, Trisha, Kelsey, Tracy, JC, Martha, Jennifer, Allison, Flighty Girl, Juan, Sarah, Leah, Christine, Catalina, Alicia, Nicole, Taylor, Julia, Babs, Julie, MC, Britt McGee, Sierra, Jazz, Maggie, Circes, Farfalli, Christian, Jamie, Kay, Bailey, Caitlin, Shreen, Jordan, Suze, and Victoria. Big shout outs to our newest patrons this week. Let's see. So many. We've got some good stuff happening in the comments. It's been a little quiet, probably because I've been a little quiet. I'll come back in, I promise. Not feeling well has been a thing. It's been wild. But yeah, so big shout outs. Big shout outs to Maverick and Kim and Alicia and Eli and everybody in the Cosmic Surfers crew. We're going to meet this coming Saturday. Cosmic Surfers is a closed tier, but these are my real ones. These are my peeps. And if I didn't mention you, you're still my peep. All right, let's get into talking about what's in the headlines. All right, as promised, I have Eli Gomez with me. He is an astrologer and a mentee of mine. I'm rather partial to Eli. He does great things in the world. He's got a podcast that's rocking it. Eli, welcome back to the Awake Space. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
So, you've been working on a class you're going to be doing this month. Let's talk about it.
I am. Well, it's called, it's lived many incarnations already, and it hasn't even been but on the market for like maybe a couple days, maybe a week, depending on when this comes out. And it's already gone through 3 name changes. So originally it was called Your Role in Collective Action Using Your Astrology. My assistant Brooklyn was like, nope, that's too clunky. We are not calling it that. And so we decided we were going to do a poll on my Patreon, and the name that won by an overwhelming amount was Finding Your Voice Using Your Astrology. And so the theme remains the same, but that is currently the name. It may change again, but I am very confident that that's probably going to be the one that's going to stay, because I feel like that one has the best rhythm to it.
I love that. So, when we're talking about collective action, we live in interesting times, and we have Pluto in Aquarius, which gives power to the people. Let's talk about it. How can an astrologer assist people in understanding their role, if any, in collective action?
Well, yeah. So first off, nobody is a clone of anybody else. No one is exactly the same. Nobody has the exact same interests. No one has the exact same childhood or ways that they were brought up. And because we are all different and have different experiences, we all like different things. We all want to do different things. Our skills that we have are going to vary depending on the person, believe it or not. Can you believe that no one is the same? Like, is that just like a wild thought?
We're not monoliths?
Right? It's almost like it's almost like we're not mechanical. We're not just like in a machine out and everybody's the same. It's not the Sneetches. So what I had decided was like, hey, a lot of people are like, hey, what if we were the Sneetches? We could just, go in systems and everyone has a star on their belly. Voila, easy as that, right? Well, because we're not all
Right.
clones, it just doesn't work that way. And that's part of collective action. Not everyone is going to be the people on the street with their fists in the air. Not everyone is like that. However, there are people who are, and I'm not negating their importance. We do need people who are on the streets and being out there and showing themselves in numbers. However, we also need people who are security. We also need people who are planners. We also need people who are kind of behind the scenes working with other networks of people trying to network and share events, share information, really getting the message out there.
Connectors.
The marketers. Yes, and we also need people who are in finance, who are able to help fundraise and fund all of these events in order to show, hey, there's this collective action event. There are these people who are wanting to resist whatever it is that we are resisting, and we want to show up in numbers. And believe it or not, because we live in a capitalist society, we need money to do that. So we need people who are fundraisers. And all of that together, we need people who fit each one of those things. And so there you go. Not everyone is just, a protester on the street with their sign and their garb and everything. So this class is meant to help empower the students to say, hey, this may be where you are most aligned with in collective action activities. Maybe you're not someone who likes to do finance or be behind the scenes. Maybe you are someone who likes to be seen, make a point, and you are very good at it because your chart clearly shows that you have authority and you claim it. And so therefore you might be someone who will benefit more by being out there. However, Susie over here may decide that she wants, maybe I shouldn't use Susie because Susie is somebody we know. Maybe I should use.
Well, we're not talking about Susie evolutionary.
You can edit that out. I'm trying to think of
But Susie's done her fair share. So
yes, I'm sure. I love Susie. She's great. No, but let's just say Bob over here is like, hey, I'm not really someone who likes to be out there, and I'm really someone who likes to kind of just fit in and be along on the side. Maybe Bob, though, has a lot of experience in accounting, so therefore he might be really good with fundraising and kind of going through in all the legal mechanisms that may be needed for a protest event, because there's going to be lawsuits and all the ones that put pressure. So
there already
we are going to need people who are doing that. So, but that is also collective action. And so a lot of people look over that, but this class is supposed to really be a way to show people using their astrology what role they may be more aligned with.
Right. So as an old activist, one of the things I think is really cool about astrology that I know you're going to show people is how to work to find objectives too, beyond the resisting, but maybe finding solutions. Because in this era we're in, just resisting against something may not have the results you want to see without an underlying objective to attain. That's something I think astrology has a lot of potential to show people on how to come into agreement on objectives. Is that something you're looking at?
Oh, for sure. Because just like how nobody is a clone.
Friend.
I know, right? Just like nobody's a clone, no resistance method is clones either. And so you're going to have certain people who might want to take collective action for school boards. You might have people who may want to take collective action for environmental, I don't know, what is it called? The name is just completely leaving my brain. File not found. environmental protection. You know, you may have people who want to go out there and resist environmental protection. Not resist it. Okay, what is going on with my words today? It's just like not
advocate
not
for it. You're
yes.
excited. It's okay. We'll smooth out as we go along.
But
so
there's
finding like
who,
your area of interest.
Right. Yeah, there's people who are going to want to focus on different areas, and that's something that is also going to shape the specific objectives of any collective action movement is the people and their collective interest. So that's something that I'm also going to be looking at as well.
And you're very excited about this, as you should be, and very enthused, which makes for great teaching. My question, because you mentioned something before we started recording, is what do you have to say to people who feel like the only thing to look at is the current administration and the debacles that are going on there, and feeling hopeless or feeling like they don't have a voice or they don't have the ability to do anything? What do you say to that?
Do you want me to give my woo-woo response or my overly practical response? Or both?
Both.
Okay. My overly practical advice is set the phone down, put it away for a little bit. You know, it's not necessarily a distraction, but it can be. A lot of people look to outside themselves to satisfy certain needs that they are not giving themselves in a moment. And so they turn to outside events. Now, that's like saying like, oh, well, then what do I do? You know, if I put the phone down, I don't know what to do. There's not anything that I feel like I can do because I'm not constantly getting that consumption of what it is that I've been putting my attention to. Well, that's kind of what is supposed to happen because it's turning into you. What can you do? And if you are often so attached on your phone looking at all the current news headlines, do you feel like you need to be completely up to date? How about take a walk in your community? See what can be done with a smaller amount of people who, because in communities, like in our neighborhoods, you know, my neighborhood only has about 50 people. You know, if we wanted to have a clean sidewalk, it really only takes maybe 2 of us to really just get a shovel and do it. It's not really it's not as overwhelming as looking at national events and be like, oh, look at all this like 300 million people and such and such million people are doing this and the other such and such million are doing this. That can be overwhelming because humans have a very hard time with conceptualizing big numbers. And so when you look at your local level, when you look at your even neighborhood level, and you try and think, what can I do to better this community? Which will then help better the national community because national is really just, you know, a whole bunch of smaller communities when you really think about it.
Right.
It will make your life so much better and so much easier because you will notice and you will probably find interests in doing things in your local community that you probably wouldn't have seen if you were just sitting through Threads or Blue Sky or Instagram and looking at all, like you have to feel like you're updated with every little bit of information because in order to be prepared. Prepared for what? Prepared for what? Prepared for you to to have some massive event that is going to disrupt the way that you've been doing things before? Is it prepared for, like, is really taking a look at what you are trying to be prepared for? Because that sense of preparedness, there's 2 different types of preparedness. There's the prepping, like prepared as in like I'm going to prep, and then there's prepared as in I want to be where I need to be. And how do I get there? Where you need to be is already something that you probably have in mind. what you're prepping for is probably something that you are trying to look outside of yourself to try. You're doing what other people tell you what you need to do. I don't know about you, but I kind of like the other kind of preparing better.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of different ways people can be involved. And I think having an astrology class around that is great, because it gets more than it gives people something to grab onto. Even if, like, you throw out, I when I teach a class like this, I'll throw out a ton of examples, but it's more like seeds, just getting it started. Like, you may not like the 15 words I picked, but you'll find your own word.
Right.
I think it's good, because I think there's so much media assault on people to force compliance and kind of force agreement into apathy. So I love that a young person such as yourself, this is like my second interview today where I'm like, well, back in my day, but where you're getting people fired up to understand that they do have a role and they can be involved in their communities, because that's where the buck stops.
Yeah. And this is kind of showing you
I love that you're
where you can also be involved too. Because I know a lot of people who want to get out there, who want to be a part of community. They just don't know how, because they're kind of thinking, oh, well, on the news, I see this. Well, what you're not seeing all the news is all the behind the scenes that's going on. You're not seeing the accountants. You're not seeing the financial. You're not seeing the lawyers. You're not seeing, well, sometimes, but you're not always seeing them. You're mainly seeing the people on the street.
But even like let's just say like Mark Elias, who has a really active Blue Sky account. And he's a lawyer who's he actively advertises for writers, social media people to join the team that he's built. He does kind of a good job of messaging those things. Not everyone does a good job messaging the help they need, but I've noticed he has. This is back in February when we're recording. But there are a lot of behind the scenes. Like me, I did one protest when I was 19, and realized that I will never like crowds. I already knew I didn't like crowds, but I did it because I was impassioned for the cause. And I didn't make it to the final destination. I ducked out like about 2 hours in, because I was like, oh. Now, I didn't know anything about astrology yet. I didn't know Scorpio rising. This is not where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I educated people on the issue ever since.
Yeah.
Everybody has a role, right?
Or like
so
for
it's
me,
nice that you're doing that, because.
Yeah, and like for me, I'm an Aries rising, and so you're like, oh, you're gonna be someone who's gonna be out there, and you're gonna be doing, well, to an extent, because I have that 8th house sun and moon. So it's like, I'll do it, but I'm going to get tired real fast, and then I'm going to kind of need to do my own thing. But then I'll come back, and I'll do it. But I can only do it in little fits and spurts, and it has to be on my terms, because that's just how I am. And that's going to be something that we're going to be looking at in the class as well, is being like, hey, if you have any specific questions on your chart, like maybe we'll look at your rising. We might look at, some other things too. Now, we're really going to focus on some certain specific areas, so I won't be doing a lot more advanced stuff. It's a beginner class, so that's really
absolutely,
it'll be very simple, easy to understand terms, but we'll probably look at some big threes and kind of go through and figure out.
I think that's really important to start with people kind of want to run into advanced astrology where it's very heady and very intellectualized, but it doesn't make you a very good astrologer. I love that you're putting practicum in and getting people learning on the ground level where they can apply it, because you get the meat and the potatoes.
Right. like, see, I just showed, like, it'll be something like kind of like what I just did here. Like, hey, I'm an Aries rising, but I'm also an 8th house sun and moon. And so that's going to kind of give a little bit more quiet overtones or more incubative overtones. If you see my chart, you'll know what I mean by that. But it's going to be something more like that. We're not going to be going through, oh, your Chiron is here, Spica is here, and all the things. Like, no, that's going to be something that we'll save that
anyway.
for whenever I do advanced classes. We'll save that for there. But it also is not necessary for this.
Although I'm going to tell you a true story, though. As much as I only did one like March, okay, and part of it, I quit at Hyde Park. I was in London. It was already it was like 2 hours already. But I was just like, doesn't work for me. That 9th house sun and Mercury in Cancer. I held a student strike on my university campus because the food in the dining hall was crap and it was expensive. And I convinced a bunch of rich kids, because I was the one that wasn't at the school. I had to eat in the dining hall, and I managed to convince very rich people to protest with me on this, because they were like, so what? I can eat off campus. And I was like, they're stealing your money. Because they didn't care that I couldn't. So when I tried to do the impassioned plea, they didn't care. So I was like, they're stealing your money.
Yeah. And that's something that that's something that I've observed on my campus too. Now, obviously, since I go to a state school, it's not, I mean, yes, there are a lot of people with money, but for the most part, it's pretty local. Like, we have a couple international students. It's where a D1 school for soccer and things. So we do bring in a lot of people from other places for that reason. But for the most part, it is local people. And so for a lot of the people with money, I've noticed that most of them tend to be College of Business students. But that's something that's kind of everywhere. And since I am a College of Business student myself, even though I'm not rich, I will say that I still have seen a lot of people in the College of Business know how to work around systems. They know how to be like, hey, I know that first-year students are supposed to be on campus. Well, guess what? The College of Business, according to the statistics from the University of Central Arkansas, is the *1 department of students who bypass that rule. And guess what? When you don't have to live on campus, you also don't have to get a meal plan. So you are saving probably $7,000 just by doing that. So
yeah, that's why I convinced my parents to let me move off campus. It was cheaper.
And that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing with a friend next year. Is we're going to roommate, and she and I are going to find an off-campus apartment, because we realize, hey, the meal plans are actually much cheaper if you live off campus than if you live on campus. And so, but we still wanted to do a meal plan because all of our friends live on campus, so it would be easier. But for our state,
learning how to navigate.
Yeah, but we have noticed that because the College of Business has students who kind of know how to work around the system, why aren't all the other departments doing that too? Because as much as I'm a College of Business student, I'm also a College of Philosophy and Religious Studies student as well. And even though there's fewer of us, every single one of them have stayed on campus and have the most expensive meal plan. Why is that? Because it's the default. So why are the College of Business students learning to work around the system while other people aren't? That's kind of something that I've noticed as well.
Well, there's socioeconomic factors, there's cultural factors, there's family behaviors. As the cultural anthropologist in me can wax on about that. But systemic skills are something really to cultivate as we move forward with Pluto and Aquarius, because even though we're seeing massive systems failure in some cases, but certainly change. Understanding systems themselves is what's going to build what's next. And by studying how you can participate in collective action, you can, and learning how to pick your objectives, you then also look at foundational systemic building.
Yes. Because at the end of the day, the reason why we have societies is because we are all collectives. We all collectively banded together, or, well, maybe not we all, but the majority of us, and said, hey, we want to create this neighborhood, or we want to create this city. Now, you may be thinking, I never chose to be in the city. I'm maybe only 12 years old, and I'm living here because my parents did. Well, at some point, somebody somewhere said, hey, I want to be a part of this community, or life has led them somehow to be a part of this community. So that community would not be the same community if there weren't any people, if there weren't lots of people who kind of just said, hey, I'm going to be part of this specific city of New York, or this specific city of Los Angeles, whatever that is for you. And that is something to keep in mind, because every single person is contributing somehow, some way to their community. It may even be by not
unintentionally.
Yeah. It may even be, hey, I don't like my community, so I'm going to stay inside and do nothing. Well, you're still contributing to your community that way too, because you're kind of showing your community that you don't really want to be a part of it. And so what do you think that's going to, what impact that's going to leave? Now, there are probably good reasons why some people might do it, just as much there may be unintentional or very intentional reasons why people do it. But indecision is in itself a decision. And that's something that we're going to talk about in this class too, is being like, hey, you know, how do we tend to make decisions? Do we tend to make decisions because we are just like, well, life has led me here, so I guess I'll do this? Or are we going to take an active role in decision making and own our authority and make decisions from that place? So that's something that we'll also be talking about.
I love that. Those are good skills to have regardless. You know, just daily life stuff. You know, being an active participant in your own life. I always enjoy hearing from you, Eli. So when is this class going to be?
It will be March 22nd. It'll be at 1 p.m. Central Time. So that's going to be 2 p.m. Eastern. And let me do the math. I think that's 11 a.m. Pacific. Yes. So that's going to be the date. It will be on Zoom. There is only 75 spots. And so I am also advertising this. So make sure that you get your spot now before they are all taken up. So, yeah.
Right. We'll have a link for the show notes that people can check out. And you've been talking about it on your podcast, right?
Oh, yeah. I've been talking about this on just about every episode for a little bit, and that's how I've learned that people are actually like, oh shit, I actually want to do this. You know, like this is something I actually want to
love that.
Look into. And so it's clearly
that's great.
Yeah, it's clearly a problem that has been a part of, especially in the college student world. Like, you know, they're like, I don't know how, like, I'm still learning, you know, I just now got car keys and a job, and I am just now learning, you know, where my place is in society. And by taking this class, it might be something that helps. So, you know, entrepreneurship mindset me is like, hey, you know, let's create a solution for this. And so I decided to do this class.
Absolutely. It's so funny because in the 60s, long before my time, and I only say that because my kids, when they were not even teenagers, but what was it like in the 60s, Mom? I'm like, I was born 2 weeks before Woodstock. I don't know.
What was it like being born in the 1900s?
But great. It was great. I got to build my own video games.
Oh, wow.
On a cassette tape.
Oh, wow.
In 1981. Oh, wow. I played Pong when it first came out. I had a speaking
that
spell.
was fun.
Actually, it transformed my world. I was like 8 years old when Pong came out. And I was like, oh, the TV is finally interesting.
I can
But
do shit with
anyway,
it.
right? Oh yeah, because I didn't like watching TV. It was passive, so it was boring.
Right.
But anyway, the young people that were like in my parents' age group and maybe just slightly older than them in the 60s, they didn't care about their place or whatever. They just took action. Now, granted, that's kind of how we ended up here. But some of it was good. Some of it, well, so I find it interesting with young people today going, I don't know, whereas the youth movement in the 60s, they didn't care. They just pushed forward. And I look forward to seeing a middle ground with that, because I think it doesn't all have to burn.
No, you don't have to throw the baby out
Nobody
with the
wants,
bathwater.
no. And today I will say, and I've been saying it for years, you need to think like the French Resistance more than the French Revolution, because people haven't adequately studied their history, because it didn't really help the average person back in the French Revolution. It actually hurt the average person. It built the bourgeoisie. But my other favorite thing, history. But I love young people stepping up to teach, to empower, to help people evolve and grow. And I love that you're leading that charge. And how exciting.
I know, it's my first class too, so I'm like, oh, we'll try this. I've always wanted to. My mom used to tell me, oh, back when I was little, I always wanted to be a teacher or a preacher, and so in a way, I kind of get to do a little bit of
There you
both.
go.
So, yeah.
Oh, that Sag is strong.
Oh
But
my, it's
but yeah,
almost like
teaching and
it's
preaching.
almost obvious.
Isn't it? It's fun. I love watching it, and I love watching you grow. And you should sign up for Eli's class, because this is a great opportunity to learn about yourself in other ways. The more you learn about how you can get out into the world, the more you have to dive deep inside to be the most effective you could be in the outer world as well, and grab your power back. So
Yeah.
I love it. All right, you guys can check the show notes. Thank you for coming on, Eli. We'll have you back on after you teach the class, and I want to hear a review of how it went.
Oh yeah, of course. And it probably won't be the only time I do teach this class. It may come around again in the near future. I may put it on a cycle because I have gotten a lot of interest in it, and I know that I can't do everyone in one session because, believe it or not,
Yeah.
Zoom has a cap as to how many people can join a specific meeting. So I will
Yep,
definitely
it
probably
does.
do multiple rounds of it. But for right now,
Well, and it's kind of
I just have this
fun.
one.
I'm not going to lie. It's fun to teach it more than once, because every class is a little different, because different groups
Yeah.
of people. So you'll like that. Cool. Thanks for being
All right.
here.
Well, yeah. Thank you for having me.
We're looking at what's in the headlines this week. Remember, this isn't necessarily personal to you. These are just me giving you a heads up of what I think is going to be up and out in the world. It is going to be a pretty spicy week, but if you actually want the truth, I've toned these the F down. So I think my language might be a little understated for some of the stuff we're going to see, especially over, the 14th and 15th. So you can expect it to be pretty spicy. And if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, do be advised that it is very possible there will be provocation to cause protests to erupt into violence. And we could see excessive use of force or an excuse used to put in more authoritarian measures. It's a possibility. It's not 100%. None of these are 100%. None of my predictions are 100%. None. I'm 87% accurate. I give predictions when I'm 80% certain. Just because I'm 80% certain doesn't mean it's going to be right. That's why I don't ever claim the timeline shifted. I mean, I'm right or I'm wrong. Integrity matters. Okay. So March 9th through the 12th, the moon is in Leo and it's pushing boundaries and it's going to incite a little bit more than it can handle. We could see big announcements by people of prominence or a brand, like a luxury brand. And it could be both. So it could be celebrities, politicians, brands, board of directors. It's just important, so-called important people of note making announcements or a company making an announcement. We can see temperatures rise or fall abruptly, issues with ice melt, melting glaciers, rising seas, and currents. We could hear about that. This is global. Tensions erupt in the Straits of Taiwan and territorial waters of the Philippines. So we could hear about that. Iran faces a crisis or announces a change in domestic policy. So we could hear stuff out of Iran. Sometimes we have to search for this news. It's not always on American news. I look at trade magazines a lot, or I look at like Reuters, things like that. We could see issues in the Levant. That includes Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and northern Iraq. We could see issues with U.S. foreign policy changing. That would be a shock, right? Surprise attacks on military installations, Navy ships, and or military commands, global. Issues with drones, missiles, and incendiary devices. Political leaders and heads of state under attack, assassinations, or attempts at those. All financial markets under strain. Violent rhetoric incites physical violence, either resistance or acting on orders, if that sounds familiar. Hacking, leaks, ransomware attacks, and DNS server attacks, computer systems failing, etc. Terrorist attack involving vehicles and or drones, internet disruptions, issues with satellites, cables, and communications, issues with power supply, transformers, electrical grids, anything from an accident to the weather could cause that. That's global. Could see big lightning or tornadoes, hail, and storms that start fires in rural areas. Issues in the tech sector, servers go down or there's an event that takes a large company offline. Leader deposed, removed from office, or voted off of a board. So that could be a CEO. Celebrity scandal, financial, or due to hedonism. If you don't know that word, that is your vocabulary word for today. Look up hedonism. Mining accident or collapse or issue with minerals, mineral rights, and mining, solar flare or solar storm, typhoon, cyclones, wind, fire of all kinds, big tornado possible. Again, everything is global. So not just in the United States, unless I say it's for the United States specifically, or mention a country specifically. March 12th through the 14th, we have the moon in Virgo, and it is tense. Lots of casting blame, issues with services, and systems of all kinds. Insurance company could make an announcement, issues info about policies, or closes certain branches. Healthcare under strain, issues with wildlife and veterinary services in rural areas. Big rain causing large amounts of damage on the ground. Erosion events, landslides, rock slides, sinkholes, tornadoes, hail, snow, ice, big waves. It could also be like avalanches. Air, water, and foodborne diseases. The measles and shingles hit the headlines already. Maritime accidents and blocked waterways, issues with a cruise ship or cruise ships. This could be rough seas causing problems. It could be people getting sick at a buffet. It could be a number of things. It doesn't mean it's a complete tragedy. Biological and or chemical weapons used and or discovered or discussed. This could be most likely in Eastern Europe. Missile, drone, or rocket launch goes wrong. Potential accidents involving faulty infrastructure, bridges, freeways, ports, and docks. Systems grind to a halt. Things have trouble working. That includes anything from schools, states, hospitals, governments, and or mechanical, any kind of system. So, of course, we have the deadline for the U.S. government. Election violence and interference in Europe and Australia is potential. Expect issues with supply chain, trucking, vehicles, and trains. That's global. Deals with negotiations go sideways, fall apart, or get delayed, and that's international and domestic, political, and business. Instability in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. NATO and other international organizations make announcements. Offshore earthquakes over a 6.0 on land could see up to a 6.5 in any seismic region. Issues with the U.S.-Mexico border. And then border crossings, issues with mountains and summits. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean there's fighting. It could be immigration issues at all different kinds of borders, but it could be issues with mountain climbers. It could be, flooding from glaciers. And I'm thinking of like in the Himalayas, but it could be something in the Alps as well, not just in the United States. Attacks on judges and civil servants. This could be global. Immigration and customs matters global. Rules, policies, and procedures upheld and process in play. So people are going to try to use the rules, basically. Assassination attempts, global, and potential disruption or illness of a major world leader. Don't get your hopes up, but maybe. March 14th through the 17th, the moon in Libra demands, sword in hand, that people are getting riled up and into action. Sabotage, issues with public transportation on subways and trains that carry politicians and civil servants. Big wind, temperature changes, issues with air and ocean currents. Air traffic disruptions due to labor strikes and contract negotiations. Accidents on roads and in the air due to wind, weather, and mechanical failures. Public protests continue, issues outside of courts and public offices, satellites and communications disruptions, internet failures, or technical issues in general, terrorist attack, noted violence in urban centers. It could be vehicular. International organizations have a crisis. We could see threats of war, threats of nukes, warring words. It doesn't mean those things will happen, but people are using warring words. Leaks from military, rogue units, militias have conflicts, global coups, and other strange events politically. Financial abuse or scandal revealed. Supreme Court or other high court judges or international courts in the news is global. ICC or ICJ mentioned or make declarations. We could see a prosecutor, investigator, or judge make a bold move. New information leaked about U.S. officials and or financial matters to do with an elected official. Public violence, mass shooting, stabbing, or issue with domestic violence. Politicians start changing their tune, rhetoric changes, and propaganda spins in a different direction. Issues to do with international agreements, treaties, organizations, Commonwealth, etc. That includes UN, NATO, all of that. Air traffic disruptions, limited airspace. This could be global and it could be for a variety of reasons. Global conflict escalates. And that gets us up until March 17th. And then the moon will pop into Scorpio on the 17th, which is next Monday. So you'll hear more about that next week. It's going to be volatile, guys. It just is. This on a mundane level, on the bigger than you level, there's going to be a lot that happens. And this full moon could, since it is a lunar eclipse and it is visible in North and South America, we could see trade deals go south. We could see issues. It's this full moon eclipse is also happening in the 4th house of the U.S. Constitution, and it may be showing where it's being brutalized. I think those of us who can see it being brutalized, but people are going to have to admit it a little bit more. So politicians are probably going to have to admit it. I don't think it blows the Constitution out of the water. I just don't. It's an intense full moon. It's just an intense full moon. So we may see some very interesting events happen, especially in the nation's capital, in the United States. But that doesn't mean there won't be, protests going on throughout Europe, Asia. There could be political violence in other places. We are in a time of enduring change. And that means things are going to be messy. Nobody wants to see it be messy. I get that. But that doesn't mean it's going to be bad for you inherently. Okay. We have to be adaptable this year. We have to be able, I know people hate the word pivot, but that's exactly what we have to be able to do. Okay. Alrighty. Up next, I'm going to end you with Mercury Retrograde Survival Guide. How to make the most out of your Mercury Retrograde. I feel a little bit like the leave Brittany alone guy when it comes to Mercury, because everybody blames Mercury retrograde for absolutely freaking everything. But Mercury retrograde is really about small annoyances. The big stuff that goes wrong, the big stuff that goes kablooey tends to be other transits. Okay. Most people anyway, just know enough about astrology to be dangerous. And everybody's heard about Mercury retrograde. So poor Mercury gets the blame. I think we all need to be really, really happy that Mercury is going retrograde, because it's going to impact decision makers. And that is a saving grace. So Mercury is going retrograde right now is really going to help us on the big picture, because nothing is going to work right if an order is given, if a plan is being divulged or whatever. It's all going to go tits up. Okay. So, and I'm not talking about you. You know who I'm talking about. All right. So this is what I'm going to read just a little bit. I'm not going to go like house by house like I did in the magazine. If you want to check that out, you're welcome to get the magazine. It's for sale in the Patreon, or you can join the Patreon at the $15 level and grab your copy. So, but I'll read the introduction and I'll give you the salient information. All right. We need to be really, really happy about Mercury retrograde this month. Have you seen all the chaos? Have you seen the wrecking balls? I mean, how could we miss the captains of chaos in action right now? Which is why Mercury stationing retrograde in March is a really good thing. The fact that it's happening on the day of the full moon and eclipse seems a tad extra, but it just might thwart some nasty and dastardly plans. Mercury may just end up being that meddling kid we all need to help Scooby and the gang stop the swamp monster. Current events aside, Mercury retrograde is hardly ever at the crux of the whole problem. In fact, Mercury retrograde is about annoyances, irritations, miscommunications, and mechanical oopsies in our individual lives. Remember what I wrote in the Venus retrograde article? Retrograde isn't bad. Direct isn't good. There are accidents, pileups, mechanical issues, foibles, printer and phone issues, hacking and communication failures during Mercury direct because of aspects to other transits. So it's not all poor little Mercury's fault when it's retrograde. Mercury retrograde in Aries is going to make it difficult for warring words to go past words. It won't mean people aren't fighting mad. But it's kind of like in the old kid shows when the cartoon would pull out a gun. I know it's not appropriate. And it would shoot a bouquet of flowers, meaning things will not work out the way they are intended in the outer world. And yes, it may seem like we are surrounded by clowns. I know it already does, but they will start tripping over their feet. That doesn't mean the chaos will end. It's just not going to land quite the way the people want it to. And things will start to misfire and backfire. On a personal level, this means we need to be cautious in what we say and think twice before letting our internal monologue escape. Just saying it like it is might not land how you expect it to, and will potentially come back to bite with a little more force than preferred. Mercury retrograde in Aries means there needs to be more listening, less talking and grandstanding, and more contemplation. It's a time to review, revise, and edit. Look for the little details and depersonalize information coming in your direction. You might feel a little extra sensitive during this Mercury retrograde because it happens on the day of the full moon, which also happens to be a lunar eclipse. So it's going to be a day that packs a punch energy-wise. It's probably a good idea to have devices charged, batteries at the ready, reading material in hand, and expect some weird weather, as well as disruptions to cell and internet service. There could be action out in the world that has us all in our feels, and words may not convey the depth of feeling. Art, photography, and music might help siphon the big feels we can't quite find words for. This Mercury retrograde is a great time to inform yourself on meditation techniques or ways to focus your thoughts. What most people don't realize is that meditation is not always seeking to get to no mind or an empty mental space. It can be thinking a mantra or a repetitive phrase over and over again, or setting a timer for 5 minutes at a time to get a task done that is repetitive, like the dishes, floors, folding laundry, gardening, etc., spreadsheets. It's also a great time to reframe really strong ideas about what we're personally able to do and how we can do it. Now isn't the time to perfect techniques so much as reorganize capabilities. If you think of Mercury retrograde or any other kind of retrograde as a form of time travel, that can help you navigate the wibbly-wobbliness of the retrograde cycle. So remember, this is the cycle, and it's written out in the magazine, but we have the pre-retrograde phase, and it happens about 2 weeks before Mercury stations. The station is when the day before retrograde motion begins, and it looks like the planet is stationary in the sky. Then we have the retrograde motion where it appears that Mercury is moving backwards in the sky. It's an illusion, but it's an illusion we live with. And then it stations again before it moves direct. And again, it looks like it's stationary in the sky, like it's standing still. And then it moves through the shadow phase. There's no pre-shadow phase. There's a pre-retrograde phase. The shadow phase has nothing to do with shadow work. It's all about the 2-week period where Mercury moves back over the ground it was retrograde in. Okay. So those are the facts. That's what I wrote in the magazine. There's a breakdown on how Mercury retrograde will impact you on a personal level and what you need to focus on. But what I can say, the biggest thing is to watch your clapbacks. Don't get into it with people. It's a time to reassess things. Think about how you think about yourself. This is pairing nicely with that full moon in Virgo. We can be really cruel to ourselves. We can be really mean to ourselves. And it's not something to have a badge of honor about. You see so many people like, I'm so mean to myself. And then people are like, oh man, me too. And then you get a little sympathy club going, but it doesn't move you forward. Okay. It doesn't move you forward. What moves you forward is saying, oh, wow, that was really mean. How would I feel if I heard somebody else talking to somebody I cared about that way? And it doesn't mean you then beat yourself up because you've been bullying yourself. But I'd be like, well, how could I say that different? How could I reframe that for myself? Okay. That's an important skill. And it is going to be kind of wild out there, but stuff is going to backfire. And so it may be almost like a comedy of errors in a really surreal and strange way. So there's that coming up. Going back to the Venus retrograde, I know a lot of people are blaming it for the blow-ups in friendships, relationships, etc. Guys, Venus isn't causing that, and it's not screwing with you. It's forcing you to look at where you've grown, where things are not mutual, where things are not in balance, and it's making you look at what you really, really need to thrive. Venus is about how we attract that which we need to feel secure. And if you have friendships that are not balanced or equal, if you have people in your life who are not necessarily as supportive as you need support to be, or maybe their version of support isn't your idea of support. I'll never forget years ago when I was in my second marriage, I was asking for some support on a project, and someone was foolish enough to say, well, I do support you. I don't tell you no. Imagine how that went after that. Did I lose my temper? Yes, I did. Because not saying no was not support. First of all, you're not the boss of me. Even if people are married, spouses are not in charge of each other. There's no ownership papers there. And I was like trying to convey and speak the support I needed. And I was flat out told, well, I don't find what you do interesting. You know, I'm like, but I support you in your career. I support you in these things. And he's like, yeah, but your stuff isn't interesting. Mine is. And it was just like, no, actually, it's not. And that was one of the many nails in the coffin of that marriage. That very well could have been a Venus retrograde time period. I'd have to go look. I'd have to remember the year. Now that's kind of an extreme example, but yeah, there was a lot of things that got this lady to where she's at. Understanding what support means to you, understanding what resources you need. I know a lot of times we look at the salary and being able to pay our rent, which duh, that's important. Being able to eat is nice. But I was advising a young person over the weekend as they were looking at manifesting things. And I was like, I want you to step back from the details. And I want you to think about, how do you want to feel? What does freedom feel like? What's it like to be on a road trip? You know, like at the start of the road trip, when you have the good snacks, right? You've got the radio cranked up, or your favorite songs are playing on your favorite playlist for road trips. So, what's the music? What's it like? Do you have your windows down? You know, are you blasting? What are you doing? You know, once you get on that open stretch of road, or you're on the S curves, how does it feel? Right? Don't think about where you're going. Don't think about what you're wearing. Don't think about what car you're driving. What does it feel like to be in that moment? What does it feel like to be able to go to the grocery store and buy eggs without any guilt? What's it like to, grab your kids a toy and not have to think about your budget? What's it like to be able to take time off if you're sick and not have to worry about it? What's it like, if you want to travel, don't just think about like the one place you want to go, because you might have it idealized, right? And what's in your head might be different from the reality. But what is it that you're wanting from that experience? What do you want? That sense of being, a little cosmopolitan, a little sexy, a little freer, a little bohemian? Or are you feeling like all business and capable and strong? If you're afraid of things, why are you afraid of them? If you're afraid to do things on your own, if you're afraid to take a risk, why? Why? And, even if something happened in the past, why? What's stopping you? When you look at all the reason why you can't, you're blocking the roads to why you can. When you're looking at all the reasons why you can't, you're blocking the roads and the pathways for why you can. And I know this world looks like a great old shit show. I know there's so much going on right now. I know that it's hard. And I know a lot of you got hit economically recently. I get it. Again, I built from nothing. I understand. I've lived my Pluto transit through the second house things, and it was over 20 years. That was fun. Not. But it taught me to reassess. I was never money driven in the first place, still am not. But I also learned that I couldn't disenfranchise myself and thrive either. I'm experience driven. Knowing what drives you is important. And we talk about that in the Healing the Money Wound class. And I'm going to be putting up a little podcast with some little extra bennies for the mystery school people that come out of that class this week. Okay. So if you're in the mystery school tier, keep your eye out for a special presentation where I kind of break down how to consider what really matters to you. Because going forward, that's your root. That's your grounding, knowing what really matters to you. And you may think you already know, but if you haven't deconstructed, if you haven't examined this, if you haven't done it from a physical understanding, if it's just mental, you're probably still in your social cultural programming. Understanding what enlivens you and what doesn't is at the root of self-actualization. Understanding that, and you can start to make other things happen. And it doesn't have to take 20 years. It can be a pretty accelerated process to what I had to go through to develop these processes. The practical application from the theories. Because theories are nothing. Theories are ideas until they're proven correct or wrong. But even then, just because it's an idea is nothing until it's put into action. You can think of an invention, but if you never make it, it's never done anything. So it's just an idea. Ideas are a dime a dozen. There's no such thing as a $1 million idea until it's put into action. And healing the money wound isn't necessarily about money itself. It's about self-worth and value, understanding your deservedness, and understanding what kind of resources motivate you. But we call it money because money kind of gets those things in this world. And even if capitalism as we see it goes away tomorrow, money will still be here. We'll still have currency until maybe Pluto in Taurus. And there was a big monetary change when Pluto came into to Taurus in the 1800s. It's when the U.S. started printing paper money and moved away from using metals. So that innovated money. Well, we'll see another financial innovation when Pluto enters Taurus. I won't be here to see it, and probably most of you won't either, because it happens in like what? If Pluto enters Taurus in 2135, and it'll probably be more than 0 degrees before those things come into play. So we kind of have to make peace with it, understanding that even billionaires have a money wound because they don't know how to feel satisfied. They don't have an enough button. And that leads to gluttony. And that's as harmful as having a mindset that repels us from receiving. There's a happy middle ground. Okay. There's a happy middle ground. And this Mercury retrograde, this Venus retrograde, this eclipse is telling us to prune the stuff, prune it that isn't serving us. You do that, well, you change your world, my friends. You don't need to change the world. You need to change your world, how you live in your world, in your physical body, in your mental body, in your emotional body. You do that and changes happen around you. That's how you impact change the biggest. Okay. Because as individuals, there are things bigger than ourselves. We can't stop a volcano, but we can pay attention if we live near one and decide how we're going to live around that and what we're going to do about it. Like, do we move further away? Things like that. Okay. Alrighty. I hope you leave this episode understanding you are far more valuable and capable than you think, and that you do not need to feel doomed by anything happening this week. You have a lot more power than you know, and that's why people use tools of oppression to make you think differently. I'm Laurie Rivers, and I look forward to talking to you next week when we're going to be examining some more of March astrology happenings. See you next week.